A 5-year-old billionaire falls for a 20-year-old. Ensnared in the mother's perfect plot. In the small town of Havenwood, Vermont, everyone knew the name Arthur Sterling. He was a successful tycoon, respected throughout the region for his immense wealth and his philanthropic heart. At 65, he had seen all the highs and lows life had to offer, having built an empire in the construction materials industry. 5 years ago, after his wife of 40 years, Laura, passed away from a long illness, he decided to return to his hometown, seeking peace in his twilight years and fulfilling a lifelong dream, establishing a scholarship fund to help underprivileged students. Mr. Sterling lived in a sprawling mansion, nestled beside vast green fields, isolated from the noise of the city. Every day, he would wake before dawn, walk through his gardens, enjoy a cup of chamomile tea, and read. Many in town gossiped that since Laura, his beloved wife, had passed, Mr. Sterling had shown no interest in romance. Though a few local widows had tried to get his attention, he had always politely declined. Until the day fate led him to Chloe. Chloe was a young woman who had just turned 20, living with her mother, Eleanor, in a small cottage just a stone's throw from Mr. Sterling's mansion. Her family was one of the poorest in town. Her father had abandoned them when she was just a child. Eleanor scraped by with farm work and odd jobs to raise her daughter. But since her youth, she had cultivated a reputation for being cunning and silver-tongued. She always taught her daughter one thing: a pretty face is a ticket to a better life. Don't you dare waste it on some poor fool. Chloe, however, was different. She maintained a gentle, innocent demeanor and a polite, obedient attitude. Having just finished her high school exams, she took a part-time job at a newly opened coffee shop near her home, a place frequented by locals and passers-by, including Mr. Sterling. One fateful morning, Mr. Sterling stopped by for his usual black coffee. His eyes accidentally met Chloe's, and a strange feeling stirred in his heart. At 65, he had witnessed countless forms of beauty, but the image of this young woman with her long, shimmering hair, graceful posture, and gentle smile caused a flutter in his chest he hadn't felt since he was a young man. Perhaps it was the pure clarity in Chloe's eyes, or the respectful way she spoke. But in her, he saw a phantom of his late wife, Laura, as she was in her youth. Chloe, too, was surprised. She never expected that Mr. Arthur Sterling, the famous tycoon, would be so approachable and kind. Despite his age and status, he showed no signs of arrogance. He spoke to her softly, and each time he left, he would leave a generous tip, 3 or 5 times more than anyone else. The owner of the coffee shop even joked, if you managed to catch him, you could really become his lady. From those visits to the coffee shop, Mr. Sterling began to pursue Chloe more earnestly. He invited Chloe and her mother to his mansion for dinner, inquired about Eleanor's health, helped pay for repairs to their cottage, and offered to fund her entire college education if she wished to continue her studies. The town began to whisper. Some praised Mr. Sterling for having the heart of a young man, while others sneered that Chloe was a gold digger. But none of the gossip could stop the bond that was slowly forming between them. That afternoon, a sudden downpour turned the village road into a muddy mess. Chloe's little coffee shop was empty of customers. Mr. Sterling, as if by habit, still appeared, wearing only a thin windbreaker. His silver-streaked hair was damp with rain, but his eyes remained warm and gentle. Chloe quickly grabbed an old-fashioned umbrella and ran out to meet him. The small gesture left Mr. Sterling momentarily flustered, but also deeply touched. This 20-year-old girl, with her delicate and thoughtful manners, seemed to possess the grace of a much older, more experienced woman. Thank you, Chloe, he said, his voice a low baritone. Still working, even in this rain. Chloe smiled softly. Well, it'd just be bored at home. I'm used to the rain. For some reason, Mr. Sterling felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the 5 years since his wife's death, he had been living like a ghost. Though he appeared in public, attended charity events, and made small talk, deep down, he knew the part of him that felt excitement. The part that looked forward to something new had gone dormant. Yet, a few simple words from Chloe had warmed his heart again. After finishing his hot coffee, he stood up, looked at Chloe for a long moment, and said gently, "When you and your mother have a free day, please come visit my home. The grapefruit tree in my yard is heavy with fruit, just waiting for someone to pick it." Chloe was taken aback for a moment. Then a small smile touched her lips, a blush creeping into her cheeks. "I'll tell my mother." Mr. Sterling said nothing more. He walked out of the shop in silence, but his steps were light, as if he had just shed an invisible burden. Behind him, Chloe stood motionless for a long time, her hand still clutching the dry cloth she had yet to fold. A strange emotion swirled within her. It wasn't infatuation, not exactly a crush, but a profound curiosity, an ambiguous feeling that made it impossible for her to stop thinking about him. That evening, as mother and daughter sat over their simple dinner, Chloe mentioned Mr. Sterling's invitation. Eleanor immediately put down her chopsticks, a calculating glint appearing in her eyes. One she didn't bother to hide. As a woman who had tasted her share of bitterness, she knew that an opportunity like this doesn't knock twice. "He invited you. That means he's interested. Don't be a fool. I'm going with you tomorrow. And my kames and askins kwallen are down." The next morning, the two of them carried a basket of fresh fruit to Mr. Sterling's mansion. The heavy oak gates swung open, and they were both stunned by the vast garden, shaded by ancient trees and featuring a lily pond in full bloom. Eleanor couldn't hide her awe, while Chloe just observed quietly, absorbing a sense of peace so different from her own chaotic life. Mr. Sterling came to the gate to greet them, his smile as kind as ever. He wore a beige linen shirt, leaning on a wooden cane, looking far more dashing than other men his age in the village. Lunch was served on the veranda, with a direct view of the lily pond. Eleanor showed off her cooking skills while Mr. Sterling helped set the table. For the first time in her life, Chloe found herself in a space that was both cozy and elegantly formal. When the meal was over, Mr. Sterling poured tea. His gaze rested on Chloe for a long moment before he spoke. "If you have any desire to continue your education, I am prepared to support you. A woman with an education will have a smoother path in life. Just think of me as family. Don't hesitate." Before Chloe could figure out how to respond, Eleanor was already thanking him profusely. Her eyes lit up as if she'd just struck gold. After that meal, their bond deepened quickly. Every afternoon, Arthur Sterling would visit the coffee shop, not just for tea, but to talk with Chloe, the 20-year-old girl, who had never set foot outside of Havenwood, found herself drawn to the gentle, calm demeanor of the older man. He was not only successful but also an incredibly attentive listener. He told her stories of his impoverished youth, about the days he spent working as a docker in Chicago to send money home to his mother. He also spoke of his late wife, and of the 4 long years he spent by her side, caring for her during her battle with cancer. Chloe listened, a lump forming in her throat. Her own father had left when she was too young to remember, and her memories held no image of a kind man. She had grown up amidst her mother's bitterness and her caustic warnings that men couldn't be trusted. Being around Arthur, therefore, left her utterly bewildered. Initially, Chloe always kept a certain distance, not daring to hold his gaze for too long or to speak too informally. But Arthur never pushed. He remained patient, continuing his visits, asking after her, and always waiting for her to smile before he left. That sincerity slowly began to melt the icy walls around her heart. Eleanor, on the other hand, grew more proactive. For every holiday, she would bring a gift to Arthur, sometimes fresh vegetables from her garden, other times a jar of her homemade pickles. Outwardly, she always claimed it was to repay his kindness. But inwardly, she was calculating every move with precision. One evening, she spoke bluntly to Chloe. "He genuinely cares for you. And the love of an experienced man is the most reliable kind. I'm not forcing you. But if you're smart, you'll know to seize this." Chloe was silent. Deep down, she knew she was falling into an indescribable turmoil. Arthur was nearly 50 years her senior. But he wasn't vulgar or using his money to entice her. He was simply, quietly, good to her. His small acts of kindness made her feel an incredible warmth. One afternoon in June, Arthur called to invite both mother and daughter over. This time, however, Eleanor made an excuse about being busy with farm work, deliberately pushing Chloe to go alone. "You're 20 years old now. You have to be bold," she said, pressing a new dress into Chloe's hands and telling her to make herself look beautiful. Chloe went to Arthur's mansion with an anxious heart, but when the gates opened, she saw him already standing there, holding a bouquet of pure white lilies. He didn't say much, only handed her the flowers and said, "Congratulations on getting into college. I received the acceptance list this morning." Chloe froze. She hadn't even had the chance to check online yet. But he already knew. Her hands trembled as she took the bouquet, a strange emotion swelling inside her. For the first time in her life, she felt so cherished, so valued. That same day, Arthur said something Chloe would never forget. "If you'll allow me, I want to care for you and protect you, as the man in your life. There's no pressure, I only hope for the chance to love you with the purest of intentions." Chloe was silent for a long time. But Arthur didn't press for an answer. In that moment, he simply looked at the young woman before him with the eyes of a man who had waited a lifetime for one more chance at love, no matter how fragile the hope. Chloe returned home from their meeting, her heart heavy with a storm of emotions. She sat by the window all evening, still clutching the white lilies. Their clean scent mingled with the smell of damp earth after the rain, making her chest ache. She understood that with his proposal, Arthur had offered her all the sincerity of a man who had already endured too much loss. Eleanor didn't need her daughter to say a word. One look at the dazed expression on Chloe's face told her that everything was going according to plan. That night, she stopped speaking in riddles and started discussing more practical matters. "Let me be honest. A man like him is a rare find. He's wealthy, has status, and genuinely loves you. And you're 20. In the prime of your life. If you know how to play your cards right, your entire future will change." Chloe didn't respond. She just walked quietly into her room, hugged the bouquet tightly, and began to cry. She wasn't crying from sadness, nor from joy, but from the overwhelming confusion and pressure weighing down on her young shoulders. In the days that followed, Arthur never rushed her. He still came to the coffee shop every morning, ordered his usual black coffee, and looked at her with the same affectionate gaze. One time, he sent her a brand new Schwinn bicycle with a handwritten note. "The road to campus is long. I don't want you to struggle." After reading it, Chloe cried again. Each of his considerate gestures was like a drop of warm water, slowly melting the final layer of ice around her heart. And then, her answer came late one afternoon, as a storm was brewing. Chloe stood waiting in front of the mansion's gate, holding a small cake she had baked herself. Arthur came out, unable to hide his surprise and emotion. The young woman smiled and said softly, "I brought you a cake. I remembered you saying you like sweets." He took the cake, his eyes welling up with tears. This 20-year-old girl had come to him on her own terms. Not with a promise, but with a small, meaningful act. From that day on, they both tacitly understood that their relationship had entered a new chapter. The whispers in town grew louder. "That Chloe girl is really climbing the ladder." Some would say, "Mr. Sterling is an old fool in love," said others. All of it reached Eleanor's ears, but she just smirked. To her, the town's gossip wouldn't put food on the table. The only thing that mattered was that her plan was succeeding. She began to hint at the subject of marriage with Arthur, using the excuse that her daughter would soon be leaving for school and that without a formal commitment, it would be hard to avoid scandal. Arthur didn't object. In fact, he proactively brought it up with Chloe. "If you feel ready, I want to have a proper announcement, so people will understand that you are important to me." Chloe looked up at him and hesitated. "But I still have school. I'm afraid my friends will judge me." He smiled gently. "It doesn't matter what they think. All that matters is that you know I have nothing but the highest respect for you." For the first time in her life, Chloe felt she had worth. Not because she was beautiful or young, but because she was being valued as a real person. The announcement party was held on a Sunday afternoon in late August at Arthur Sterling's mansion. The guests were mostly close neighbors and a few of his old friends. Chloe wore a simple, elegant white dress. Her hair flowing freely down her back. Her face was free of elaborate makeup. Yet she radiated a natural beauty. When Arthur took Chloe's hand and gently announced to everyone, "I officially consider Chloe a part of my family. From this day forward, she will be the one by my side for the rest of my life," the atmosphere seemed to freeze. A few whispers broke the silence, and confused glances were exchanged across the room. Eleanor, however, played the part of the grateful mother perfectly, her mouth never ceasing its stream of thanks. That evening, after the guests had left, Arthur walked Chloe through the garden. He stopped by a bed of white orchids his late wife had planted, stared at them for a long moment, and said softly, "I thought I would live alone for the rest of my days. But then I met you, and I realized that no matter how strong a person is, they still need the warmth of a true home." Chloe heard him but didn't dare to reply. She suddenly felt so small, as if she were stepping into a world far more profound than she had ever imagined. From that day on, the townspeople slowly began to accept their relationship. Only one person, Eleanor, never stopped her calculations. She started probing about assets, about his will, step by step, preparing for a much larger plan she had been secretly devising for a long time. After the party, Arthur and Chloe's relationship officially became the talk of Havenwood. Arthur began arranging everything so Chloe could prepare for college in Boston. He had planned to take her to the city himself. But Eleanor skillfully intervened. "It's better to let Chloe go alone, so she can get used to it. She's a college student now. You should let her be a little more independent." Arthur thought it was a reasonable suggestion, never suspecting that this orchestrated independence was the first step in a far more sophisticated scheme. The day Chloe left, Arthur saw her off at the bus station. He gave her a bank card preloaded with funds, a savings account passbook in her name, and a new smartphone. Overcome with emotion, Chloe hugged him tightly. The feelings she had for him now were not the passionate love of youth, but a deep attachment, a sense of security she had never known. As soon as her daughter was gone, Eleanor began appearing at the mansion more frequently. She brought gifts from her garden, baked goods, and then deftly started cooking and cleaning, gradually making herself an indispensable part of the household. One afternoon, she carefully broached the subject with him. "Arthur, have you thought about a legal marriage for the two of them? To give Chloe a proper standing. Otherwise, when her friends find out, people will talk." The question stunned Arthur. He had never considered pressuring Chloe into a hasty marriage. But Eleanor had a point. In their society, having no official status meant having no protection. He nodded. "Let me think about it. If Chloe agrees, I'll get the paperwork done." Hearing this, Eleanor smiled, her eyes shining with the satisfaction of someone who had just laid another solid brick in the foundation of her plan. Boston greeted Chloe with its overwhelming noise and novelty. She was like a little bird, both awestruck and excited. At first, she called Arthur often, telling him all about her new life. He would listen patiently, occasionally sending her some hometown treats via a delivery service. His love didn't require physical closeness. Just caring for her and watching over her from afar was enough for him. But then, the calls became less frequent, and the replies to his texts grew slower. The initial reason was a heavy class schedule. Then it was being busy with group projects. Arthur didn't blame her. He told himself that Chloe was living the life of a young person, and he shouldn't tie her down with his own loneliness. Yet, deep down, he felt a growing unease. Chloe was changing. She began to dress differently, no longer simple dresses, but tight-fitting tops, ripped jeans, and designer shoes. On social media, she posted photos of herself laughing brightly alongside male friends her age, sometimes with an arm thrown casually over her shoulder. One day, he called and heard loud music in the background. Chloe's voice was distracted. "I'm a little busy right now. Can I call you back later?" That night, he sat alone in the silent mansion, his heart aching with an unbearable emptiness. In Boston, Chloe quickly became a popular figure in her classes. She was beautiful, articulate, and had an air of mystery about her background. Her friends admired her not just for her looks, but also for the luxury items she occasionally used. At a class party, after a few drinks, She half-jokingly told them about her boyfriend, a billionaire who was 47 years older but truly loved her. The story made the group erupt. Some were shocked. Others burst out laughing. In the following days, Chloe began receiving invitations from wealthy male students. Among them, a young man named Kyle quickly became a familiar name in her text messages. Kyle was young, easy to talk to, and more than once had drop a hint. I can't believe you're with someone so much older. If I had the chance, I bet I could make you fall in love all over again. Chloe didn't reject him outright. She started texting Arthur less, feeling weary of his repetitive, concerned questions. She had no idea that, by chance, her own mother had read those messages. Instead of warning her daughter, Eleanor just smirked and thought to herself, no one stays in love with an old man forever. The important thing is to get everything you can before you get out. The bus from Vermont pulled into the Boston station at 8 in the evening. Eleanor stepped off, her eyes sharp and cold, a stark contrast to the simple country mother persona she usually wore. In her mind, things were spiraling out of control, and she would not allow herself to walk away with nothing. When Chloe opened her dorm room door, she froze at the sight of her mother. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Eleanor didn't answer, her voice icy. "How long were you going to hide this from me?" She sat on the edge of the bed, getting straight to the point. "I saw the pictures of you with that boy. Kyle. Is it? Are you planning to leave Arthur? Do you think that young punk has anything to offer you? Or are you just going to throw away all my years of effort?" Chloe looked up, her eyes red. "I didn't mean for it to happen. But I feel like I can't talk to him anymore. I don't love him. Mom. I'm just grateful." Her words made Eleanor slam her hand on the desk. "Grateful. And you're just going to leave? Are you still living in a fantasy? Can you eat your feelings? Arthur just has to sign a marriage certificate, and everything will be yours. The mansion, the bank accounts. Don't let some stupid crush ruin your entire future." For the first time in her life, Chloe was afraid of her own mother. The woman who had toiled to raise her had transformed into a terrifyingly calculating schemer. She said nothing more, just quietly turned and walked out, wandering into the night with no destination in mind. After that night, Chloe avoided her mother, using her studies as an excuse, her heart in turmoil. On one side was her guilt towards Arthur, on the other, the immense pressure from her mother. That afternoon, she told Kyle everything. "If I told you I was with a much older man, would you still want to be with me?" Kyle was momentarily stunned, but then he placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, "You think I don't know? I'm not blind. But I've never looked down on you. Because if your feelings are real, the past doesn't matter." Chloe bowed her head as tears fell silently. For the first time, she felt someone accept her unconditionally. "Kyle, I'm so tired," she whispered. He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. "You just choose the right path. I'll be here for everything else." That very evening, a cruel coincidence occurred. Arthur Sterling was scrolling through social media when he saw a photo Chloe had been tagged in by her friends. In the picture, she was beaming, her eyes sparkling, her face tilted slightly towards Kyle, who had his hand placed intimately on her shoulder. The caption was short, "Cutest couple on campus." The photo was a slap in the face to his trust. He didn't feel anger, just a profound stillness as he studied every detail. He didn't call her. He didn't text. That night, for the first time in years, he opened a locked drawer in his desk, where he kept his important documents, including an unsigned draft of his will. On that will, the name of the sole beneficiary was clearly written, Chloe Ann Miller. His hand trembled as he picked up a pen, but then he set it back down. The next morning, he called an old friend, a retired lawyer named Mr. Davis. "Over for tea, Davis," he said, his voice calm. "If an old man puts all his trust in someone, only to find out he's being deceived, is there a way to protect his assets without destroying himself in the process?" Mr. Davis looked at his friend with concern. "Are you having doubts about the girl, Chloe?" Arthur didn't answer, only shaking his head. "I don't want to doubt her. But sometimes, the silence of someone you love is more painful than any betrayal." After that conversation, he decided to hire a private investigator in Boston to find out about the young man named Kyle. He felt despicable for doing it, but he needed to know the truth. Just 3 days later, the report arrived. Kyle came from a middle-class family. His parents were civil servants, and an ex-girlfriend had accused him of two-timing. Below the report were 2 photos. One showed Kyle and Chloe sitting close together at a late-night diner. The other was of them embracing in a narrow alleyway. Arthur was stunned. It was clear Chloe wasn't being coerced. She looked genuinely happy. He folded the report, letting out a long sigh, as if releasing a great burden. In Boston, Chloe was tormented by guilt. After Eleanor returned to Havenwood, she lived in a constant state of remorse. One evening, Kyle asked her to meet him by the Charles River Esplanade. A gentle breeze blew across the water. He looked at her, not smiling, and simply asked, "You still can't let go, can you?" Chloe was silent. "I'm not blaming you," he continued, "but I don't want to be the other guy anymore. If you can't forget him, then you should go back to him." Understood. This is the final part of the story. Chloe was floored. She thought he would try to hold on, but instead, he stepped back, giving her the right to choose. Back in her room, Chloe collapsed onto the bed, her mind a dizzying reel of overlapping memories. Arthur waiting for her in the rain, him painstakingly replanting the flower bush she liked, and his slightly trembling handwriting in the note, congratulating her on getting into college. The next morning, Chloe's phone buzzed with a message from Arthur. It had been a long time since he'd texted. The words were as gentle as always, but she could feel something was different, like a final farewell. "If you're free today, I'd like to invite you back home for a visit. There are a few things I want to give you in person." That afternoon, she caught the bus back to Havenwood. As she walked through the mansion's gate, she saw Arthur sitting in the backyard, holding a teapot, his gaze distant. He slowly poured a cup of tea and placed it on the stone table beside him. "Sit. Have one last cup of tea with me." Chloe froze, a sharp pain piercing her chest. Arthur turned to look at her, his eyes no longer filled with gentle love, but with the weariness of a man who had weathered a great storm. "I know you've already made your choice. You don't need to lie. I don't blame you. But I hope you didn't just see me as a stepping stone to a new life." Chloe trembled, wanting to explain, but he raised a hand to stop her. "You don't owe me anything. But from today on, we should each go our own way." He handed her an envelope. Inside were all her documents and the bank card. "A little parting gift. There's enough in here for your 4 years of college. We're even. No one owes anyone anything." Chloe burst into tears. Before she could say another word, Arthur stood up, turned his back, and walked into the house. The wooden door closed behind him, and a chapter in the 20-year-old girl's life officially came to an end. Chloe sat numbly on the bus back to Boston, her eyes vacant. She couldn't understand why her heart ached so much when the person she was supposed to be moving toward was Kyle. Back in her room, she sank to the floor, sobbing like a child who had just lost their most precious possession. Her phone vibrated. It was a text from Kyle. "Let's get dinner tonight. I miss you." Chloe didn't reply. She turned off her phone, crawled under the covers, and felt nothing but a vast emptiness. Meanwhile, back home, Eleanor nearly went mad when she found out. She screamed into the phone. "You fool. You've ruined everything. I had it all in the palm of my hand. And you threw it away for some little brat." Her rage stemmed not just from the loss, but from the bitter taste of failure. She immediately called Kyle, her voice full of command. "You need to see her. Now. Salvage what you can. I will not lose like this." On the other end of the line, Kyle smirked. "Calm down. The girl's heart is weak right now. It's not a total loss. There are other ways to get it back." That afternoon, Kyle appeared at Chloe's door. He stepped inside, his voice soft. "I heard what happened. Are you okay?" He lightly touched her hand. "I'm sorry. But I'm not here to blame you. Even if you have nothing left, I'll still be by your side." A month ago, those words would have moved Chloe to her core. But now, they rang hollow, like a well-rehearsed lie. She looked up, staring directly into Kyle's eyes. If I really had nothing, would you still be here? Kyle flinched. It was only for a second, but it was enough for Chloe to see everything. She laughed. A dry, bitter sound mixed with tears. You're a very good actor. Kyle's face darkened, the gentle expression vanishing. You think I'm with you for money. Don't drag me into this farce you and your mother created. Chloe was stunned. She understood then that from this moment on, she was truly alone. After 3 days submerged in despair, Chloe finally opened the envelope from Arthur. Inside, besides the bank card containing $100,000, was a handwritten letter. His script was a bit shaky, but it held a heart-wrenching tenderness. Dear Chloe, I don't know what to write other than thank you. Thank you for walking into the life of an old man like me, even if only for a short while. I understand that you can't keep a young bird in a cage forever. I don't regret the money, and I certainly don't regret the affection. My only regret is that I wish you had been a little more sincere. Perhaps then, my joy would have been complete. I wish you the strength to live a life that is truly your own. Chloe sobbed. For the first time, she felt truly blameworthy. Not for falling for Kyle, but for treating the love of a kind man as an option rather than something to be treasured. She frantically called her mother, but no one answered. Her text, "Mom, I was wrong," was met with only a delivered receipt. In that moment, Chloe realized her mother had cut her off completely. At the same time, in Havenwood, Arthur became even more reclusive. The vast mansion now felt like a glass cage, trapping him with his memories. One afternoon, unable to ignore a nagging worry, he called a friend in Boston and asked him to check on Chloe. A few hours later, his friend reported back that Chloe had missed several days of class, hadn't left her off-campus room, and looked haggard, showing signs of depression. Arthur was silent. He was no saint who could easily forgive someone who had betrayed him, but he also couldn't ignore the fact that the girl who once called him uncle was struggling with the consequences of her own actions. He booked a bus ticket and quietly headed to Boston. That night, as Chloe lay motionless in the dark, she heard a knock on the door. 3 knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. She reluctantly got up, cracked the door open, and froze. Arthur was standing there. He was a bit thinner, his hair much grayer, but his eyes were the same as the day they first met, gentle, kind, and full of a deep, aching concern. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. "Arthur." He said nothing, simply holding up a container of hot soup and a carton of milk. There wasn't a trace of resentment in his gaze. "I know you don't need me anymore, but if you still think of me as someone who once cared for you, please eat something to get your strength back." Chloe broke down, collapsing to the floor and clinging to his legs. "I was wrong. I was so wrong." Arthur quietly bent down and placed a hand on her shoulder, saying nothing. Perhaps he understood that some mistakes can't be fixed, but they can still be forgiven, especially when the person who made them knows the pain of their fall. Chloe sat on the bus back to Havenwood, her head resting on Arthur's shoulder. Silent the entire way, she was given her old room back. Everything was just as it had been. Only the people had traveled a long, painful circle, returning covered in scars. She began to live like a different person, quiet, withdrawn from social media. She tended to the garden, helped with cooking, and read books, as if atoning for her mistakes in silence. But just as heaven granted them a moment of peace, a new storm began to brew. Back in Boston, Kyle hadn't disappeared. He had been watching Chloe from a distance. When he learned she had returned to Havenwood and been taken back by Arthur, a bitter resentment festered within him. He started sending Chloe texts, ranging from sarcastic to threatening. "You think you're forgiven and it's all over? I have photos. I have videos. You don't want the old man to know what you used to say about his money, do you?" Chloe's face went pale as she read the messages. She quickly blocked the number. But it was too late. Kyle had already started spreading anonymous rumors on social media. A 20-year-old gold digger. An old fool being led by the nose. In less than 24 hours, the entire town of Havenwood was buzzing. Chloe was truly terrified. Hiding in her room, trembling as if the whole world had turned against her. The storm of rumors didn't strike like lightning but crept in like a silent, rising tide. The vicious gossip nearly broke Chloe. She didn't dare leave the mansion, living in a self-imposed prison of fear and loneliness. Arthur, however, refused to bow his head. He calmly did what he did best. He handled the problem with logic. With the help of his lawyer, Mr. Davis, he collected all of Kyle's threatening messages and traced the bank account behind the rumor-mongering. The owner was none other than Eleanor. It turned out that after Chloe cut contact, Eleanor had sought out Kyle, colluding with him to pressure Arthur into transferring his assets. Once he had enough evidence, Arthur decided to sue Kyle for defamation and file a formal complaint against Eleanor for conspiracy. That evening, he sat at the dinner table with Chloe and said in a low, steady voice, "I need you to be brave enough to stand as a witness. The truth needs to be called by its proper name." Chloe looked up, her eyes still filled with fear. "If I sue my own mother, what kind of person does that make me?" He looked at her for a long time before replying. "A true person is one who dares to live righteously, even when a loved one is wrong. Forgiveness does not mean complicity." All that night, Chloe sat on the veranda, replaying everything in her mind. The next morning, she went to the law office on her own and signed the witness statement. Every stroke of the pen was like a cut, but it was also a step toward healing herself. Not long after, Eleanor appeared at the mansion's gate, gaunt and furious. "So now you see your mother as the enemy, Chloe." Chloe walked out to face her, her eyes no longer afraid. "You chose money, Mom." "I'm choosing myself." Eleanor lunged forward to slap her, but Arthur stepped out just in time, standing between them. "Who do you think you're hitting? Hit me." Eleanor stood frozen, facing a completely different Chloe, no longer weak, no longer submissive. She stormed away in a rage, never once looking back. The case began to attract media attention. But strangely, public opinion wasn't as harsh this time. Arthur's calm and humane handling of the situation gave many people pause. The online comments began to shift from criticism to sympathy. As for Chloe, after confronting her mother, it was as if she had shed her old skin. She proactively returned to school and arranged to make up for her missed work. A professor at the university, who had been quietly following her story, nominated her for a special scholarship. During the interview, Chloe didn't hesitate to tell her entire story, the parts where she was wrong, the parts where she was weak. The entire interview panel was silent. A female board member said gently, "It's not easy to be that honest. I believe you won't return to your old path." Meanwhile, Kyle began to face the consequences. With the evidence against him, he was temporarily suspended from the university. His mask had fallen, and his academic career was in jeopardy. As for Eleanor, she was fined, and her reputation in Havenwood was destroyed. The last time she contacted Chloe was with a single, bitter text message. "When I die, don't you dare put my name on my gravestone." Chloe read it and cried silently through the night. No matter how wrong her mother was, she was still the woman who had given birth to her. Arthur watched all of this from a distance. He didn't interfere deeply, doing only one thing. He quietly attended the university's scholarship award ceremony. Standing at the back of the hall, he watched Chloe walk onto the stage in a simple white dress, her face radiant and confident, and a warmth spread through his chest. He knew then that he hadn't been wrong to give her a chance to start over. That afternoon, a heavy rain suddenly fell over Havenwood. On his way back from the market, Arthur was cycling slowly. As he rounded a bend, a speeding truck swiped the back wheel of his bicycle. The impact wasn't severe, but it was enough to send the bike wobbling. He fell, his head hitting the concrete curb, and he lost consciousness. When Chloe received the call from a neighbor, she felt the world go numb. She had just finished her final presentation for the semester and didn't even change clothes before rushing to the bus station. During the entire ride home, memories of Arthur played in her mind like a slow-motion film. The sight of him standing in the yard, the simple meals he had cooked, the sound of his deep, warm laugh. She couldn't imagine what life would be like without him. At the Havenwood General Hospital, the doctor diagnosed him with minor head trauma and said he needed to be transferred to a larger facility for observation. Chloe sank to the cold tile floor, choking back sobs. "He's going to live. Right. Please, save him." She signed all the necessary papers without a moment's hesitation. Legally, she was nothing to him. But in her heart, he was the only family she had left in the world. She spent the entire night outside the recovery room, her head leaning against the wall, tears streaming down her face. This time, she wasn't crying out of regret, but out of a primal fear, the fear of losing the only person who had ever loved her unconditionally. After 3 days, Arthur was out of critical condition. When he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Chloe, slumped in a chair by his bed, dark circles under her eyes, her hand still tightly gripping his. He looked at her for a long time, then whispered, his voice as thin as a thread, "Don't leave again. Please." Chloe burst into tears, nodding frantically. She squeezed his hand. "I'm staying. I'll stay forever. If you need me." News of Arthur's accident and Chloe's devoted care spread quickly. Those who had once sneered now looked at her with different eyes. She offered no explanations, simply continuing to care for him, feeding him every spoonful of soup, giving him every pill. She was no longer the naive 20-year-old girl. She had been through enough loss to know how to cherish what she had. One morning, when Arthur was more alert, Chloe helped him walk down the hospital corridor. He turned to her and asked, "Do you still want to go back to school?" She nodded. "Yes. But only when you're well again." He smiled. It was his first smile since the accident. But just as they found a sliver of peace, a new storm hit. On a social media forum, a post suddenly appeared with a malicious title. "Heavenwood hot girl moves in with 70-something tycoon after scholarship scandal. True love or a new ploy?" The post juxtaposed a photo of Chloe receiving the scholarship with sarcastic captions, suggesting she was a master actress and that the entire affair was a calculated performance. Vicious comments multiplied. "Marry a rich old man and you get everything. And classic gold digger gets another handout." Chloe sat in front of the screen, reading every word. She didn't cry. She wasn't angry. She just felt empty. It seemed all her efforts were still not enough to stop people from judging her. The rumors reached her school, and a few students started whispering behind her back. Meanwhile, after being discharged from the hospital, Arthur, though physically weaker, was mentally sharp. The once silent mansion was now filled with the warm sounds of their quiet life together. When the new rumors reached the university, some students began to gossip, with one even asking mockingly, "Hey Chloe, did you come to school in your own car today, or did your billionaire chauffeur drop you off?" Chloe just gave a faint smile and didn't reply. She understood that the more she reacted, the deeper she would be pulled into the vortex of scrutiny. She quietly went to the administration office and asked to withdraw from the scholarship program. In her letter, she wrote, "I do not want the generous funds from this program to be tarnished by unverified personal matters concerning me." 3 days later, a member of the scholarship committee, the same woman who had interviewed her, found her in the library. "We are not concerned with your past. This scholarship was awarded for your effort and your honesty. Your request to withdraw has been denied." The woman handed her a piece of paper. "We've decided to host a symposium called The Journey from Mistake to Maturity. If you're willing, we'd like you to be our opening speaker." That evening, Chloe called Arthur. "Arthur, if people keep saying I'm just using you to get ahead, what should I do?" On the other end of the line, he was silent for a moment, then replied, "Are you living on my money right now?" "No." "Are you deceiving anyone?" "No." He chuckled softly. "Then just hold your head high and keep walking. The people who speak ill of you will eventually get tired, but the person who lives honestly will always stand firm." On the day of the symposium, the hall was packed with students. Chloe walked onto the stage without notes, without a script. She spoke of her mistakes, of her fall from grace, and of the forgiveness she received from the man she would be indebted to for the rest of her life. She spoke of courage, not the courage to fight the world, but the courage to admit you were wrong, and to continue living with decency. When she bowed her head to finish, the entire hall was silent. Then, a single clap broke the quiet, followed by another, until a powerful, rolling wave of applause filled the room. One student stood up, then two, then three, until everyone was on their feet, clapping. It wasn't because she was a victim. And it wasn't because she was beautiful. It was because she had shown them what it meant to be real. A few weeks later, in Havenwood, Arthur Sterling held a small ceremony on the grounds of his mansion. He was launching the Laura Sterling Spirit Foundation. Laura was the name of his late wife, and spirit was the principle he had always lived by. That day, in front of his relatives and the town officials, he made a shocking announcement. He placed a folder on the table. These are the transfer documents for 15% of my company's shares, valued at nearly $5 million, to establish a scholarship fund for intelligent, underprivileged students across the state. A murmur went through the hall. This single act silenced all the rumors. No one could say he had lost his mind over a young woman when he was turning his personal wealth into a legacy for the entire community. That evening, Chloe and Arthur sat together in the yard. "You know," Chloe said, "you don't have to give me anything. I just want to contribute to the good work you're doing." Arthur looked at her, his heart filled with warmth. "In that case, I'm putting you in charge of the first round of scholarships. Our own town of Havenwood has nearly a dozen students in need. We should start right here." Chloe immediately threw herself into the work. She visited every home, learned about their circumstances, and verified their academic records. She felt as if she were reliving her own childhood. Except this time, she wasn't the one receiving help, but the one giving hope. On the day the first scholarships were awarded, Chloe wore a simple white blouse and stood at the podium. "I was once a poor girl who made mistakes. But I am not standing here today to talk about my past, but to begin a new journey." A shy 11th grade girl asked, "Were you ever a bad student, like me?" Chloe hugged the young girl. "I was much worse than you. But that's okay. Being a bad student isn't scary. The scariest thing is being afraid to learn." Arthur sat in the back row, quietly watching the woman on the stage, who had grown into herself from the wreckage of her past, and he knew he had not been wrong to place his faith in her. Just when everything seemed peaceful, a sudden crisis struck. The news broke simultaneously across several outlets. Arthur Sterling's construction materials company was facing the risk of bankruptcy due to financial irregularities from years prior. The company's stock plummeted, and the local rumor mill erupted once more. All fingers pointed again at Chloe. "I told you so. An old man's folly. And I bet she conspired with someone to gut the company." Even the professors who had supported Chloe began to express concern, advising her to stay out of the public eye for a while. But this time, Chloe was no longer afraid. Arthur, for his part, remained remarkably calm. One night, he came home late from a meeting to find Chloe huddled in the yard, her eyes red. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I feel like I'm such a burden to you." Arthur sat down and handed her a cup of hot tea. "You are not a burden. People think that in old age, all you want is peace. But the truth is, peace isn't the absence of storms. It's having someone by your side who doesn't leave when the storm hits." Chloe squeezed his hand tightly. Even if the whole world turned its back on them, his belief in her was enough. 2 days later, at a surprise press conference, Arthur appeared before the media. He confirmed that the company's difficulties were the result of past management mistakes. When a reporter asked about the transfer of shares to a young woman, he replied, his gaze sharp, "She is a person I love dearly. But neither she nor the Scholarship Foundation has anything to do with the operation of my company. I welcome a fully independent audit." His frankness and integrity turned the tide. A few days later, the news reported that the investigation had found no wrongdoing connected to Chloe or the foundation. That evening, Arthur walked into the kitchen and gently placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a document transferring full executive authority of the Laura Sterling Spirit Foundation to Chloe, along with a handwritten note. "I chose you not because you were perfect, but because you didn't run when the storm came." Chloe threw her arms around him and wept, not for the gift, but because after everything, there was still one person who believed in her unconditionally. The early summer breeze swept gently over the vast green fields. The grounds of Arthur Sterling's old mansion had now been converted into the Laura Sterling Community Center, bustling with the laughter of small children. Arthur had gradually sold off his remaining shares, retiring to live out his remaining days peacefully in his hometown. One day, he sat down across from Chloe. his eyes warm. You've walked a very long road with me. Have you ever thought about stopping to officially become my life partner? Chloe blushed, her cheeks turning pink. She didn't answer, only quietly pouring him a cup of tea. 3 days later, she returned from Boston. In her hand were 2 sets of marriage license applications, fully filled out, waiting only for signatures. Arthur looked at her for a long moment, then broke into a laugh. So, the little girl from all those years ago is now calmly taking me to get registered. Chloe took his hand gently. This is so you never have to explain yourself to anyone again. And so I can properly and officially take care of you for the rest of your life. Their wedding was a simple affair held in their yard, attended by hundreds of children from the scholarship fund and the honest, hard-working people of their town. Chloe wore a simple ivory dress, with a single white lily pinned to her breast. Arthur wore a plain white shirt. They held hands, and his speech was very short. I thank life for giving me one more season of bloom. A late season, but one more brilliant than I could have ever imagined. As the sun set behind the line of trees at the edge of the fields, they sat together in the yard. Are you still afraid of what people will say? He asked. Chloe shook her head and smiled. They can say 1,000 things. But there is only one truth. That I love you. He squeezed her hand. And I love you. Not because you're a young woman, but because you walked through hell and still kept a kind heart. Thank you all for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So please leave a comment below. Your support means the world to us.